Welcome. Welcome to today's live. Finish first financially, yeah? Goran Radanovic. Good to be with you today again. We are going to talk about, I don't have an article to read today. What I actually mentioned in yesterday's live stream is that I wanted to talk about people's egos and how that affects their finances. Because in the article that I read yesterday, I mentioned things about how people's egos are preventing them from progressing financially, and I think that's so important to address because it really is at the core of many people's financial problems. And I've spoken about status and comfort being one of the two main causes that people suffer financially, and that's really, status is also really tied to your ego. And when I remember when I just completely went bust and I became homeless and I was living in my car, one of the biggest things that happened to me, the most probably one of the most important things that helped me to completely change my finances is that I stopped caring about what other people thought about me. I no longer needed to have this car to show off to people that I was supposedly successful, even though the car was financed. No longer needed to have the latest phones to kind of feel that I fit in and I'm keeping up with the Joneses. I just completely stopped caring about what people thought about me. And that was one of the best things that happened to me because prior to that, all of my purchasing decisions were really based on on trying to portray an image of success. I had an ego about myself. I had graduated with two finance degrees. I worked in finance. I wanted to portray a specific image. And I also saw my friends who were progressing in life and were doing great things. And I thought, well, if I can't keep up with them with cash, then I'll use borrowed money so that I'm on their same level. So when I went bust, I no longer cared about what my friends thought. I no longer care about these material possessions, which I couldn't even afford. I just worried about improving my finances. So all of my decisions were based on improving my finances. If I thought about buying something, I would think, do I really need this? Do I is this going to help me to progress financially? Am I going to have more savings? Is this an investment or is it a liability? And those were really that was my thought process, and that's how I was driven to succeed, to become better financially, as opposed to thinking, oh, let me buy this thing because people are going to think I'm cool. Let me buy this so that my neighbors don't gossip about me having this secondhand car that I've been driving for 10 years. What are people going to say? And so all of those, when you think like that, all of your decisions are rooted in your ego. It's or you're living completely living your life for other people, which is something that I talk about. You should live your life for yourself, not for others, because when you do live your life for yourself, that's when you make decisions that benefit your financial situation and not to feed this ego so that other people are going to be impressed by you, even though your material possessions, most of them are financed. They don't even belong to you. They belong to the bank. So don't be so concerned about what other people say. So when I became homeless and I stopped caring about what other people thought, I I could have said to myself, look, I've got two finance degrees. I just recently owned a business. I've got 10 years work experience. I know finances. I could have had that attitude. Yet there I am out on the street. I don't have anything to show for those two finance degrees and being a business owner. So that kind of attitude wasn't going to help me. Holding on to that uh, image that I'd built up was not going to help me progress financially. So my ego took a complete hit when I lost everything. And you don't have to lose everything in order for your ego to get struck really hard, and where you're at rock bottom in order to make that change. You can make that change right now so that you don't hit rock bottom. You can kind of deliver your you can deliver a strike to your own ego, and believe me, that is going to do wonders for you, because your ego is preventing you from living the life that you really should be living. That's what it is. Now that I think about it, it's taking you down a path that is, ridden with debt, that doesn't have any savings. It's not going to help you to progress with your savings account. And you're going to find that you're in a perpetual cycle of debt if you're driven by your ego, if you're driven by what other people think about you. You're going to pay off maybe one debt, and then you're going to think, well, I've paid it off, but so since I've paid it off, why don't I just take out another debt? And that's really what leads to a life of perpetual debt. That's something definitely that I do not want for myself, and I would not recommend for others, but people can live their lives as they please. Obviously, this isn't financial or investment advice. Everything I say is for entertainment purposes. You do what you want with your own life. I'm just sharing my experiences. So when this thing happened to me, I lost everything. Instead of having an ego about it, I decided to put my ego aside and to admit to myself, even though I've got 2 finance degrees, that I know very little about personal finance. If I knew how to handle my finances well, then I wouldn't have been homeless. So I kind of struck my own ego and I said, I don't know what I need to know. And instead of being a know-it-all, I'm going to be a learn-it-all. And when I made a commitment to be a learn-it-all, that's when I started sponging up all of this amazing information from podcasts, from books, from videos. And all of this information was really for free about effective money management, how to handle your finances, how to get out of debt, how to build savings, and eventually how to invest that money so that I grow my savings. And all of that really started when I had made a commitment to be a learn-it-all. And most people, unfortunately, are know-it-alls. So that prevents them from ever taking that first step towards knowledge, from admitting to themselves that they don't know everything that they should and that they need to learn a lot more. And you'll find this especially with people who are middle-aged and older. One of the things that happened once I got my finances in order, and I had a significant savings account and I was kind of progressing, I saw what people around me were doing. And they were and I'm referring to people who are 45 and older, some were like even in their 60s, who I knew, and I saw that the mistakes that they were making. And some of them were, let me give specific examples of what they were doing. They had at a stage a large income which they were just blowing through every single month. So even though they were making a very good income, they were still living paycheck to paycheck. They just opted for renting as opposed to, at the very least, getting a mortgage, preferably saving up money so you could buy an apartment. But at the very least, get a mortgage so that you're paying off a mortgage instead of being a rental. And excessive spending, obviously, on smoking, on cigarettes, on alcohol, on other home appliances. You could always get a cheaper version. They went for the best version. Spending recklessly on their pets. Not actually, once they, even though they had some savings, they wouldn't invest that, or making poor investments, and also, just blowing through their savings by not working after they've saved up some money. Just typical mistakes that a lot of people make. And these were people who were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that were making their mistakes. That's when I realized that personal finance knowledge is pertinent to all ages. If you didn't learn about personal finance when you were 10 years old, when you were 20 years old, when you were 30 years old, you likely are going to keep making those same mistakes throughout your entire life. And that's what these people were doing. They were making the same mistakes. They were just kind of stuck in this perpetual loop of doing the same thing over and over again and wondering, why do they not have different results? And I completely understand that. I mean, if I hadn't failed in my early 30s, I probably would have been like 50 and 60 when it would have caught up to me. And then I would have failed, like some of these people who I knew did. So I realized that personal finance education is really important because you're going to keep making the same mistakes over and over again, regardless throughout your entire life. You could die with debt and not have any savings. That happens quite frequently. So I try to help these people. I try to share my experience. I try to share what I'd learned about personal finance. And I realized that their reaction wasn't really welcoming. It wasn't a case of, oh, great, that's really great information. It was more of going on the defense and saying, who are you to tell me, mind your own business. And in a way, I guess they were right. But, I was just, I saw the dire mistakes that they were making. I couldn't understand how they couldn't see it. But yet, when you're in that situation, you can't see it. You just keep going and you keep digging that hole deeper. So I tried to help them with good intentions. And it's not like I was telling them what to do. I just kind of said, what I would do in that situation to steer them in the right path. And they were having none of it. They didn't want to hear things about getting rid of their pets. Oh God, their pets were like their children, even though they couldn't afford them. Getting rid of some fancy furniture which they never used and other appliances and gadgets and stuff to get rid of. No, it was just sitting there. They weren't really using it, but no, they just had to have it for some reason. They were so attached to it. Other things like simple things like getting rid of your subscriptions. They would have video streaming subscription, just lay there on the bed and watch TV the whole day. I'm like, stand up, go for a walk at least, switch off that TV and cancel the subscription just so you can feel more productive and save at least that bit of money. At least that's the first step. And they just wouldn't want to listen. And some of them actually got really angry with me because I was younger. And even though I was in a much better financial situation than them, they just wouldn't. This was a couple of years after I'd been homeless, so I'd recovered and I was really on a good path. But they just wouldn't listen, and they got really defensive and mad. And I saw that it was an ego thing. That's one thing that was very evident to me. I realized that they were know-it-alls. That's the first thing. They thought that they knew everything, and then who was I as a younger person to tell them that they didn't know everything? I think that was the part that really struck them, because when I was telling them what to do, it was contrary to what they were doing. So obviously they thought that they were right and that I'm wrong, and that my advice is flawed, and they should keep going as they've been going. They couldn't handle advice from a younger person. It was that meant admitting that they were wrong and that a younger person than them knew more about personal finance than what they did, and they were having none of that. That's just it was an ego struggle, let me put it that way, where I eventually just said, you know what, I tried my best, and they don't want to hear any of it. It's their life, let them live it. And I think some of them are still struggling financially, unless they got some help. Hopefully they did. Hopefully they're doing well. But it's people's egos that are holding them back. It really is. It's something that I've never seen any cases where your ego helped you. Yeah, I'll use myself as an example. When my dating life, let's say, before I knew anything about like starting conversations with women and going up to them and trying to be flirty and trying to get their contact information, the thing that was really stopping me from doing that was my ego. I was terrified of getting rejected, worrying about what the people around her were going to think, were going to say. Were they going to make fun of me? How was she going to react? And all of these things were really tied to my ego. I didn't want to risk my ego because I had built up this image of myself now, and I thought I was cool. And if I went up to her and she embarrassed me and she freaked out, then this image that I built up for myself would just come crumbling down, and that would be so painful to my ego. I just wouldn't be able to handle it. So I've never really seen instances where your ego helped you. It prevents you from doing the things that you should be doing. It definitely is an obstacle for you, from you to be humble, from you to put your feet back on the ground and to say to yourself, I don't really know what I should know. I could do a lot better than this. I should do a lot better than this, but there's just something that's holding me back, and that's the ego. That's really what it is. You don't want to make that change because you've become so attached to these items that you've financed. Maybe you've even paid for them with cash, but you don't need them. Yet you still hold on to them because you feel like they're your identity. Somehow they're attached to your value. And if you get rid of them, then your value is going to be lowered, and people are going to talk differently about you. They're going to see you as less, and they're not going to have as much respect for you. It's all of these things that come up for you when you're thinking about changing your lifestyle so that you've got more money at the end of the month so you can dedicate it to debt and then pay it off as quickly as possible so that you can grow your savings. So these things are so important to admit to yourself, that you don't know everything, that you need to make a change. Don't let your ego stand in the way of you making this progress, because it's going to hold you back for the rest of your life. And the thing about a person's ego is that it tends to grow with age. That's the thing, it's you kind of have all of us have an ego to an extent, but it tends to grow with age. And the more I've crushed my ego, the more I've accomplished in life. And even when I wasn't successful in a venture, because I crushed my ego, I went against what my ego was telling me not to do. I went against that. And just but the fact that I did it helped me to kind of feel better, because I knew where I stood. I didn't have any regrets. And that's one of the most important things that happens when you crush your ego, is that you go for the things that you think you shouldn't, and you find out what actually what you wanted to know. You wanted a solution, you wanted to know the outcome, and you found that out. Whereas you wouldn't have found that solution had your ego prevented you from doing the things that you really wanted to do. So that's another great thing that I discover about really crushing your ego, is it eliminates a lot of regret and a lot of doubts and so forth. It just kind of helps you to expand your comfort zone more and more. Every time you go against your ego, every time that it's telling you not to do what you really want to do. And that really helps to build your character. You kind of, when you do something that you're afraid of, something that your ego is telling you not to do, then the next time that scenario pops up again, you've got a reference experience of having done that, having gone against your ego, and then doing it again, so that you can find out one more time what the outcome is and where you stand. And I think that's very important to be in that situation. You're constantly expanding your comfort zone where you're pushing the boundaries so that you can live the life that you want. So you at least you went for it. You know where where you stand. I think that's so important for several reasons actually. But when it comes to finances, it could mean the difference of living paycheck to paycheck or and being debt free and having savings. And I think crushing your ego is one of the best things that you can absolutely do for your finances. I really do believe that. It's changed my finances completely. I never thought that I could pay off debt, especially my personal finance, which was the biggest one. Yet I did it because I became a learn-it-all. And I could only have become a learn-it-all by admitting to myself that I don't know everything that I need to know, and just being humble about the whole situation and grabbing as much knowledge as possible that I could implement. You know, the the more you do that, the more knowledge you're going to gain and the more better experiences you're going to have. You're going to have different experiences as opposed to when you didn't have the knowledge. If you implement the knowledge only, of course. Knowledge, having knowledge is one thing, but implementing it is a completely different thing. But one of the most important things that happens when you become a learn-it-all is that at least you're moving towards grasping that knowledge. You're looking for it because you've admitted to yourself that you need it. So at least you're going out to get the knowledge, and you're not thinking that you don't need it in the first place because somehow magically you were born with it. So that's an important thing to grasp with regards to your ego. I think it's if if more people delivered a blow to their own egos, I think they would do themselves a massive favor in their personal financial situation, a big favor. I really do believe that it's at the core of many people's problems. And trying to convince somebody to do something that they really not want to do, where they're not at the stage to make that difference themselves, is difficult. And I don't think it's anybody's job to try and convince others. People need to do that themselves. And it usually happens, in my case, and in most people's cases, when they've just hit rock bottom, they've got nothing else to lose. And that's where I was at. But I wouldn't want homelessness to happen to anybody. I think that's a horrific situation. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So that's why every person has the option to make that change today before things get worse. So I think people are going to do themselves a massive favor to turn their financial situation around as soon as possible, because that means that the hole is not getting deeper, and the recovery process to pay back the debt is going to be much quicker than going further down the road, taking on more debt, and just digging that hole deeper. It's going to be more difficult to keep up that momentum, to keep up that discipline of paying the debts monthly until eventually you've paid everything off. Paying off debt is a long journey. It's grueling. It requires you to make sacrifices, and it's easy to get, to lose motivation, to become demotivated. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I remember when I was paying off my last debt, which was the personal loan. That was the biggest one. And it just felt I'd paid off like maybe 4 or 5 different loans before that one. So I proved to myself that I can pay off my loan, but those amounts were significantly lower than what I owed for the personal loan. But somehow I just kept at it, and I eventually found a good paying job, and I was saving a significant amount of money. And I just one day just saved up a lump sum and I paid it. And it was an amazing thing that happened to me. The proverbial chains came off my shoulders. It was wonderful. But it all started the day that I admitted to myself that I lacked the knowledge. I didn't know what I was doing with my finances. I mean, that was evident to me. Yet, even in such situations as I was, there are other people who are in similar situations. Even then, they don't want to make that change. They don't want to admit to themselves that it's them. They're blaming other people. They're blaming the government. They're blaming their bosses. They don't want to admit that they are not at that uh, education journey where they should be. They're not even embracing it. But what's what's even worse is that it just carries on like that because they think like that. They never make that change. So I think it's in people's interest to make that change as soon as possible. Yeah, I think I'm kind of repeating it, but it's kind of frustrating when I see people that are so big-headed that they want to improve their situation, but they don't want to make any changes to it. That's the problem. And the best part is that all of this information, even what I'm saying now, is available for free. That's the best part of personal finance and everything else, even like losing weight. There's plenty of information on the net for free. So you can't say that you don't know what you're doing because there's no information out there. The information is absolutely out there. You just don't want to admit that you need that information. So that's what I've got pretty much for today. I think yeah, there's actually so much to talk about with regards to people's egos and how that affects their finances. But at the root is really the person's decision to to admit to themselves that they need help, that they need the knowledge. If they're not going to accept that, then there's not going to be any progress. How can you expect a different result when you've got the same mentality towards money, when you're doing the same things over and over again, and it's yielding you a specific set of results that you don't like? How can that change? What's going to be different? The only thing that's going to cause a difference, a shift, different results is you. The day that you decide that I'm not going to keep doing things the way I've been doing, I am going to look at what other rich people have been doing. I'm going to see what the other side is like, how it feels to be without debt, how it feels to have significant savings, and I'm going to do things differently. First, I need to get that knowledge. I need to admit to myself that I need that knowledge because once I, like they say, I think the first step to recovery, the first step to solving a problem is admitting that you have a problem. That's really what it is. Because when you admit to yourself that you have a problem, that's when you start seeking solutions. So before that, nothing, nothing, nothing happens. Everything stays the same. Everything's stagnant. You keep getting the same results over and over again. And you're frustrated. You're frustrated, and that frustration just builds up over time. And you can get into a really big mess like I did. Now, one of the best, when I was telling this one lady about my situation, how I just lost everything, she said, it's a good thing that it happened to you while you were young because you had time to recover. And she was right. And that's absolutely one of the best things that happened because that I was young, because I had less of an ego that I would have had this happen to me when I was 50 or 60s, and I still had time to recover as well. So that's why I stress the importance of making that change as soon as possible, because the problem just gets worse. Your ego gets bigger with age. You have less time to recover the older that you are, and it's a bigger blow the older that you are. If you fall flat on your face at near retirement age, that's a big mental blow to you. an even bigger blow to your ego. So, but everybody's egos should be shattered, in my opinion. Okay, so that's what I've got for you today. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday to Friday. And